Hello, I'm Gabrielle Thompson, CEO and Executive Director of Free for Life International. Free for Life International is an organization based in the United States that works all over the world. Our mission is the identification, assistance, and restoration of victims and survivors of human trafficking. We believe in freedom for all, and that is exactly why I'm here with you today. I am here to update you on the situation globally and the ways that COVID-19 has shifted the world of human trafficking. This is important because each of you work with children that may be vulnerable to human traffickers. This will be an informational speech, but it is also a call to action. So to begin this, I want to talk about how COVID-19 has influenced the way that traffickers work and the way that it is influencing both sex trafficking and labor trafficking. So to begin with, while COVID-19 cannot be classified as a natural disaster in a literal sense, it certainly is a disaster and pandemic that has affected the world in great and vast ways, which I know each of you have personally experienced. The important thing to realize is that the link between disasters and the abuse and manipulation of vulnerable people is well documented and experienced first by those living in poverty and who were already marginalized prior to the disaster. So how exactly has COVID-19 affected sex trafficking? Well, first, in the face of a global pandemic, it may be easy to assume that the rates of purchasing sex would decrease. However, the statistics have said otherwise. Despite the mandated social distancing efforts being implemented around the world, the drive and demand for purchasing sex has remained consistent. Many sex buyers are communicating that not even a global health pandemic is enough to stop their behavior. While sex buyers have continued to buy sex, they have shifted the way that they do that. They have transitioned it to a virtual space instead of an in-person space. So we've seen an increase in the demand for online sexual services through pornography, webcam sites, and online solicitation. How does this influence children and youth, though? In this time, we need to be aware of children that may be at risk to being lured by traffickers. Children are at a heightened risk in areas that have been placed under lockdowns because of increased access to social media and the internet, which will likely lead to a significant spike in sexual grooming by traffickers. Children are also at an increased risk because of a disruption in their educational services, potential separation from caregivers that have fallen ill, and being left unattended during the daytime. This may prompt caregivers to entrust them to potential traffickers or child abusers under the false promises of providing them with education or work. But not only is the internet a point of access to trafficking children, but children are also at an increased risk of abuse and neglect from their caregivers. We have really seen this come to life in my organization. For example, I was talking with Department of Children's Services a few weeks ago, and they mentioned that this pandemic has made it much harder to have home checks on families, including foster care families, and those that are at risk of abuse and neglect, and those that are at risk of abuse and neglect. So this is an ideal time for traffickers to lure vulnerable children that are unable to get their emotional needs met at home. This is really important for each of you that work with this population. Now transitioning to labor trafficking. The demand and use of forced labor remains consistent in this time as well. According to our sources and research, victims of labor trafficking are likely forced to work despite the very real risk of contracting COVID-19 because they may be working without precautions like masks and social distancing. Additionally, people may take jobs that are exploitive, off the books, less than minimum wage, with no legal or health protection. The thing is, for people in dire economic straits or without legal documentation to work in certain countries, traffickers will find ways to keep them trapped in this situation. Additionally, in areas that are already susceptible to labor trafficking, like coffee bean plantations or factories, workers are experiencing layoffs and pay freezes. But without being able to seek legal advocacy or sustain their families without any income, many are continuing to work and accepting whatever wage and abuse that their employers offer. We expect to see this continue during and following the COVID-19 pandemic. Labor trafficking also affects vulnerable children and youth and is a risk, this time specifically for males that are aging out of the ability to access resources from child protection agencies. So, what does all this mean? This means there is an increased risk of trafficking around the world. Vulnerabilities are rampant in the aftermath of a natural disaster, and anti human trafficking groups like Free for Life International are remaining very aware and becoming prepared to see an influx of trafficking victims around the globe following this pandemic. We see that there is already a greater risk for trafficking and already vulnerable people, and an increased risk for those that are living in trafficking. The thing is, these events like natural disasters, economic collapses, displacement, and poverty greatly increase the vulnerability and desperation that allow human trafficking to flourish as an industry. We have seen this really come to life in every natural disaster that we have experienced as an organization and how it can ravage communities. Traffickers capitalize on widespread human vulnerability that includes material, social, and economic losses. And this is what traffickers focus on and lure. We have also already seen how the COVID-19 pandemic has created overwhelming financial vulnerability around the globe. Millions have filed for unemployment or lost their jobs since the beginning of the pandemic and may be having a hard time finding funds to cover basic needs. This is especially present for those that are daily wage earners or have been unable to have an income due to the pandemic. We as an organization have been tracking specific risk factors on a global scale to determine the increase of trafficking victims around the world. Some of the risk factors we are looking at that will impact the flows of trafficking on a global level are the erosion of rules and laws due to the pandemic, the breakdown of institutions, lack of economic opportunities, and the increase of criminal activity. These factors may be compounded by weakened legal frameworks, diminishing law enforcement capacity, disrupted or poor border control, gender discrimination. All of these set the scene for human rights violations. As we have already seen, jobs and sources of income have been terminated, leaving people vulnerable to risky, unvetted, and alternative job postings and offers. We have already seen this happening online, and it is the most common way that traffickers lure for both sex and labor trafficking. Additionally, internationally displaced persons, such as refugees and migrants that were in transit, are arguably one of the most at risk because of the economic downturn and increase in self-reliance opportunities, which makes them an easy target for traffickers. I always talk about how traffickers are experts in how to capitalize on others' vulnerabilities, and they see this time as an ideal time to strike and target particular communities to lure them into trafficking. And this is why we need to be particularly keen on protecting the children that you guys serve. So, what are our predictions moving forward as a globe when we look at human trafficking and protecting children? Again, we expect to see an absolute increase in the number of trafficking victims on a global scale. With the current COVID-19 pandemic, travel restrictions are in effect. Thus, international trafficking across borders may decrease, but trafficking is likely to increase locally and internally within each country. This highlights the very important need of organizations like yours to strengthen your efforts towards protecting your children and helping them understand the risks of trafficking. Additionally, in the aftermath of a disaster like this that leaves people so susceptible to trafficking, governments tend to focus on economic and political security of their country instead of the most impacted and vulnerable populations. Therefore, as I've already mentioned, the heightened vulnerability of people accompanied by the distractions of governments leads to an environment that creates trafficking. The thing is, more vulnerable people equals more people being lured into trafficking. We are concerned that the government and other organizations may overlook internal trafficking in response to focusing on the COVID-19 pandemic, as seen in the past with natural disasters. But we at Free for Life International and other anti-trafficking organizations are prepared to cover the blind spots produced by this pandemic. So what can each of you do as organizations? First of all, this is the time to be even more protective, aware, and present of the children you are serving. Traffickers are taking advantage of these vulnerabilities, and they are specifically looking towards children that may be orphaned or in foster care or not have support systems. See the signs and teach these children how to navigate how traffickers work, how to protect themselves, and also to educate each of you on how to operate appropriately and protect those that you care about. Additionally, stay connected to us at Free for Life International. We work all over the globe, including in Guatemala, Peru, and the Dominican Republic, and are expanding to Honduras, Costa Rica, and Brazil. We offer a customized prevention curriculum specifically designed for the populations that you serve, and we are so passionate about protecting children. We would love to help you learn the right approaches and methods. We can battle this together and we can protect the children together, but we have to do that as a community that is informed and concerned and understands the right approaches. So stay encouraged, keep protecting those little ones, and we will get past this on the other side. Thank you for your time. And again, I'm Gabrielle Thompson at Free for Life International. Please reach out to us for anything and enjoy your conference at ACH.